Jordan Peterson, everybody's revered free speech advocate, decided to give a talk on MGTOW. Although MGTOW is probably not actually the subject of his talk, it seems that that's not really what he wants to talk about, he just sort of slid it in. I don't know where this lecture is from. I don't know, like Psych 509, the psychology of advising romantic relationships. One of those classes that sound excessively interesting, but usually turn out to be a load of bullshit. Anyways, Jordan has been under a lot of criticism of late, and a lot of people have expressed disappointment in him after listening to this lecture. I was lucky to be spared of such disappointment after my ex listened to a talk between him and Sam Harris on atheism and morality. And he told me that after listening to that talk, he has to second think whether Peterson really had any intellectual capacity to reason correctly. And my ex is usually right about these things. Now, all of us has to question whether Peterson's advocacy of free speech is for the right reasons, recalling that I have mentioned that to me, any movement, any advocacy has to be approached and formulated by the right reasons. Jordan Peterson could be similar to a white nationalist, like Richard Spencer, who will advocate for free speech, and the reason isn't actually free speech, only that currently their ideology is the one that's under attack, which is the actual motive. Now, I know that some of you think that it's unfair of me to compare Jordan Peterson to Richard Spencer. I'm just going to say that Spencer is here and Peterson is...
Well, here's the decomposition of the fundamental archetype. The dragon of chaos differentiates, on the one hand, into the feminine, that's the unknown, and the feminine differentiates further into the negative feminine and the positive feminine.
Really?
The negative feminine is the reason for witch hunts.
Is this really a college lecture, I wonder? You're talking about stuff that come out of fairy tale fables. Now, those descriptions might be true hundreds of years ago, but now let me tell you what a negative feminine consists of. In our beautiful modern time in the West, a stereotypical negative feminine trait would be like a woman who drains everybody else's tax money and the societal law to do whatever the fuck that she wants, when the mentality of fuck all consequences to other people, not taking responsibility of anything, and certainly not doing anything productive to reciprocate the help from the society that she lives in. That's the negative feminine, Jordan. What la la land do you live in?
It's the reason for, there's a whole group online called Men Going Their Own Way, MGTOW. That's a very interesting group to go study.
So, are you going to talk about any woman who is going her own way? Before the feminist ideology basically twisted everything on its face, there were responsible and reasonable people, women who call themselves feminists. I used to subscribe to that type of feminism. These type of feminists define feminism as meaning women going their own way and taking responsibility for themselves and their actions. I did believe in patriarchy, but it was clear to me that the patriarchy is a natural consequence. It's because men are the ones who have to be the producer, the hard laborer, the warmonger and defender, and as a result, they became, or they get to be, the governor of households and of nations. It's sort of like you have a group of people who just sort of wandering brainlessly around, and one of those people say, well, fuck this shit. I'm going to make everything better for everybody with my great ideas and abilities, but in order to do so, you all have to listen to what I'm telling you. And usually, everybody does when that person holds up to the end of his bargain. That was essentially how patriarchy was constructed. Men took responsibility, women let them take responsibility or pressure them to take those responsibility, although admittedly the latter of which I didn't think so much about when I was a feminist. And those men get the power, natural cause and effect. So when feminism was still not completely insane, there are those of us who say, well, you know what? Fuck deference of responsibilities. We don't want to be the obedient children to men. We are adults and can take responsibility for ourselves and own up to it. We will earn respect from men by doing so. Just like how it can happen in that group that I mentioned, a person might come up to say to, the leader, I don't want to listen to what you tell me to do. I can also come up with good enough ideas to make everything better. Which is basically another way of defining natural competition. But this idea of women going their own way used to be conceptualized as feminist, by many people. That used to be something that was supposed to be admirable. Yes, who needs men anyways, right? I can do fine on my own. And I do know a few women who are actually like that. My former piano teacher, for example. She has about 70 students and she works from about 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day to teach piano to these students. Her ex-husband, had an affair, so they divorced. He probably did pay for alimony and child support, but as far as I know, that was a long time ago. And as of right now, she isn't living on anybody else's income but her own. She bought a nice 2-bedroom house in this nice neighborhood, and she never remarried. And when I ask her about it, she just say, who needs men? She certainly doesn't. In fact, for her achievements, she won a minority award, as she's Japanese, but that award was actually taken away from her because she isn't black. Awesome, right? So if the who needs men idea is admirable in a woman, as our society has populated for decades, why the fuck did you decide to pick on what is the natural result of that, which would inevitably be, well then fine, who the fuck needs women? You could have started your talk of the aforementioned, which is women's independence and lack of being interested in a long-term relationship with men, or being in a relationship with men at all, but instead you decide to pick on MGTOW.
What the fuck is...
There's lots of them. I don't know how many of them there are, and most of them are older. Many of them are men who've been through a particularly horrifying divorce for one reason or another.
Now, unlike most other critics of yours who think that you're completely bullshitting when you said that you did any research on MGTOW, I have an idea where you probably did do your research. You read some comments, didn't you? I have to admit that there are many men who call themselves part of the MGTOW movement who are just raging idiots. I myself have engaged with many of these people. They generally are people who were royally screwed over by the women in their lives, which, I can sympathize. I've had men screwing me over, but I don't then project onto all men. But of course, they just respond by saying, well, the law is behind me because I'm a woman. Which, as many of your critics have brought up, it's actually true. But my question would then be, so what if the law is completely equal? Would you then stop being pissed off at the women in your life who, royally screw you over? Somehow I doubt it. But these people hate hypotheticals and would just accuse me of being unrealistic. But instead of calling these people men going their own way, I just call them men pissed off at all women. MGTOW? Sounds like I'm trying to speak Polish.
And that's partly, you got to ask yourself, if you know the mythological stories, maybe if you made the right sacrifices, you wouldn't have so much trouble with women. It's a good question to ask yourself first. And I would also say, if you're a woman who has trouble with men, or you're a man who has trouble with women, it's not the women and it's not the men, it's you.
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And other times, it's both you and the significant other. I do agree with the mentality that before you start to point fingers at the other, you check yourself thoroughly using objectivity and reason to the best of your capability. But once you do that, you may very well conclude that, nope, it's really not me. Of course, I agree that with every bad thing that happens to you, you can learn from your mistakes. That doesn't mean that you're always the one to blame. Let me just give you two comparable examples, Jordan. My childhood best friend had her 1,000 yuan phone stolen in China, one of the thief capitals of the world. These thieves are excessively clever, as she is extremely responsible. I mean, she's still not married or even dating, the last time I heard. And she knows better than most people how to look after her things. But what these thieves did is that one of them approached her and asked her if she's this person that he is looking for. She was confused there for a second, froze there, and lost her vigilance. And just like that, the guy's accomplice went over and just quickly grabbed her phone, So is it her fault that her phone was stolen? I would bet most people would say in that situation, no. The way that her phone was stolen was excessively clever and unusual, and there was no way that she could have been prepared for it unless she knew beforehand of this tactic that's been used on people. On the other hand, let's say somebody decided to take a walk for 30 minutes and he or she is just too lazy to lock the door. What could happen in 30 minutes, right? And when that person came back, the widescreen TV was stolen. Was it that person's fault that his or her TV was stolen? Most people would then say yes, as it is common sense to lock your door when you leave the house. So naturally, we have everything in between in all of the spectrum of cases. You can learn something from all of these spectrum of cases, but that is not the same as saying it is just you.
No, it's not all men. You can be by definition, and it's not all women, that's for sure. I don't want to have anything to do with women. It's like you're a pathetic weasel.
Frankly, I'm getting a little sick and tired of conservatives like Jordan Peterson showering these types of condescension of taking responsibilities. These responsibilities they refer to is you need to find a partner, get married, and have children. It's the same shit that my parents like to lecture me over and over and over and over and over again. And only recently they stopped, as I'm currently having some major problem getting through the last bit of my PhD program. So I have no doubt that they would just start again after that, right? When I hear of these things, my question is inevitably, why? Why get married and have children? And I never get a satisfactory answer other than it's the normal, responsible thing to do. Really now. It's a normal and responsible thing to act like animals. I would agree that if, this was like hundreds of years ago when war, diseases, and natural disaster balance out the human population and we're sort of obligated to procreate because there is always the possibility that we could go extinct or, our group can go extinct. But now, procreation is literally the leading cause of us heading into extinction if we continue to grow in population exponentially while pursuing and getting used to a first world middle class and above standard of living, because when we do that, we are depleting exponentially the Earth's resources. And even with all of these amazing technological accomplishments, we still can't figure out how to treat each other right. This is the part where I lose it sometimes. Instead of creating and taking care of children, why don't we all just stop popping out more spoiled, snotty, screaming children until we figure out how to take care of our adults, especially the young working adults, especially the young working male adults. Because every single time there is advocacy going around, children come first, the elderly come first, the women come first. Who are firsting these people? The young working class, usually male, adults. And who is making sure to take care of these adults to reciprocate the sacrifices they made to make sure that these special class of people are being taken care of? Nobody. That's right. Because the rest of the people who are too busy to do the normal responsible thing, that's why. It's time we stop and become really responsible. Responsible in learning how to really reciprocate instead of just being normal. Normal isn't going to be enough in the next 50 years or so when the world is only going to keep getting smaller and smaller, both in space and resources. So what then, Jordan? Are you going to keep blaming men going their own way, not marrying women?